House will want to join me in expressing our outrage and deep sorrow following the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Texas. I know our thoughts and prayers are with those affected and all of the families who have lost loved ones. Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I want to welcome Nick Munting and his family to the gallery. Nick has worked in Parliament for over 30 years, primarily as a sous chef, but also as an Associate Sergeant-at-Arms. Unfortunately, Nick has had to leave his role because of ill health, and he is much missed by his colleagues. I know all members, particularly the member for Croydon Central, Nick's constituency MP, will wish to join me in thanking Nick for his long service to the House and in sending good wishes to Nick and his families. I would also like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now come to questions to Prime Minister Anthony Brown.
Question number 1, please.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by echoing what you've just said about the reports of the fatal shooting in a Texan primary school. Our thoughts are with all those affected by this horrific attack. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I welcomed the Emir of Qatar to Downing Street. It's excellent news that Qatar announced it will invest up to £10 billion into the UK through our new strategic investment partnership. And not only will it boost local economies and support jobs, it will support our green economy and decarbonisation. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Anthony Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cambridge is one of the most expensive places to live in the country, but unlike many cheaper places, NHS workers in the city get no high cost of living supplement. So NHS workers in Cambridge pay higher rents than NHS workers in outer London boroughs like Redbridge and Croydon and Bexley and Barking, and yet they get paid 15% less. This makes it very difficult for the NHS in Cambridge, including Addenbrooke's Hospital, to retain and recruit staff. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, work with me to make sure that NHS workers in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge get paid fairly?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for his constituents and for Addenbrooke's, and we're very proud of our NHS, and that's why we're putting record investment in, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that the independent NHS pay review body will listen carefully to what my honourable friend has just said.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thoughts also, and I know the thoughts of the whole House, are with the families of the victims of yesterday's school shooting in Texas. 19 children have died, some as young as 7, and 2 adults believed to be teachers. It is an unspeakable tragedy, and our hearts are with the American people. Last weekend marked the anniversary of both the Manchester bombing and the murder of Lee Rigby, and we remember them this year as we do every year. And today is also the anniversary of the killing of George Floyd, a reminder that we must all tackle the racism that is still experienced by so many in our country and beyond. Mr. Speaker, the Sue Gray report was published this morning, and I look forward to discussing that during this afternoon's statement with the Prime Minister. For now, I want to focus on the cost of living affecting the whole country. Mr. Speaker, since we stood here last week and I asked the Prime Minister yet again to back Labour's plans for a windfall tax to reduce energy bills, hundreds of millions of pounds have been added to bills of families across the country, and hundreds of millions of pounds have landed in the bank accounts of energy companies. It sounds like he's finally seen sense, and the inevitable U-turn may finally have arrived. So when can people across the country expect him to use those oil and gas profits to bring down their bills?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing original about a Labour plan to tax business. There's nothing remarkable. They want to tax business the whole time, every day. Labour wants to put up taxes on business. And what we're doing is we're helping people. He asks when we're going to help people. We're helping people now, Mr. Speaker, and we're putting £22 billion into people's pockets already, cutting council tax by £150, cutting fuel duty, cutting national insurance contributions by an average of £330 for people who pay for people who pay NICs. And, Mr. Speaker, how can we afford that? Because we have a strong economy, because we came out of COVID fast, Mr. Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd listened to the party opposite.
15 tax rises, and he pretends they're a low-tax government. It's been, Mr. Speaker, it's been 4.5 months since Labour first called for a windfall tax on oil and gas profits. I've raised it week in, week out, and every week he has a new reason for not doing it. The Business Secretary has said it's bad. The Justice Secretary called it disastrous. Even this weekend, the Health Secretary and the Northern Ireland Secretary opposed it. He ordered all of his MPs to vote against it last week. And now, surprise, surprise, he's backing it. Prime Minister, I'm told that hindsight is a wonderful thing. But, Mr. Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to. What?
Peter. Mr. Bone, a man who always wants to catch my eye is not going the best way to do so. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to. Exactly. What is it about the Sue Gray report that first attracted him to a U-turn this week?
Mr. Speaker, there is no surprise about Labour's lust. There's no surprise about Labour's lust to put up taxes. There's nothing original about his thought. They get off on it. They absolutely love to confiscate other people's assets. What we prefer to do, Mr. Speaker, is make sure that we have the measures that are in place to drive investment in our country and drive jobs. And it's thanks to the steps that we took, thanks to the fact that we came out of COVID faster than any other European country, which would not have been possible if we'd listened to him, that we now have unemployment at the listen to this. They used to care about this, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment at the lowest level since 1974. And, put that in your pipe.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I actually thought with his U-turn he might actually get his head out of the sand, but obviously not. The reality is that every day of his dithering and his delay, £53 million has been added to Britain's household bills. Whilst he's distracted trying to save his own job, the country has been counting the cost.
Yeah,
but complacency is nothing new for this government. Back in October, the Chancellor delivered a mini-budget that has to be reread to be believed. With inflation already climbing, he said that he understood people were concerned about it and the government was ready to act. Since then, inflation has risen to a 40-year high, the highest rate of any G7 country. If the government was so ready to act 6 months ago, why hasn't it?
But, Mr. Speaker, the government has acted, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, continues to act. This is the government that not only put in the living wage, Mr. Speaker. It was a Conservative institution, but we've now raised it by a record amount. We've raised it by £1,000, Mr. Speaker, a record amount. We've helped families on universal credit have another £1,000, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the measures, the £9.1 billion we've already put in to support people's costs of heating. We're abating the costs of fuel for people up and down the country. And, of course, we're going to do more, Mr. Speaker. We're going to put our arms around the people of this country, just as we did throughout the COVID pandemic. But the reason we can do that is because we took the tough decisions to drive the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, which wouldn't have been possible if you listened to him, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we have, let me take another statistic, youth unemployment. They used to care about it. Youth unemployment at or near a record low.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just the Chancellor back in September. The Prime Minister called fears about inflation unfounded. He was the last person to spot the cost of living crisis, just as he's the last person to back Labour's plan to help people through it. And, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just on inflation that they got it badly wrong. In the same speech, the Chancellor boasted about growth. The Prime Minister does today. How we were going to do better than all our major competitors. It was obvious that he was being complacent. And lo and behold, Britain is set to have the lowest growth of any major country except Russia. Despite our brilliant businesses and all we have to offer, why has his government inflicted on Britain the twin-headed hydra of the highest inflation and the lowest growth?
Mr. Speaker, he loves running this country down. How many times did he come to this place? How many times did he come to this place and say that the United Kingdom had the highest COVID death rate in Europe? How many times? He was proved completely wrong. Did he ever apologise, Mr. Speaker? Absolutely not. Did he ever take it back? Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. Actually, because of the steps we took, last year we had the fastest growth in the G7, and we will return to the fastest growth by 2024, 2025, thanks to the decisions that this government took, Mr. Speaker. And they don't care about getting people into jobs. They don't care. We care about the working people of this country, making sure we have a high-wage, high-skill, high-employment economy, and that's what we're delivering.
He talks about running this country down. He is running this country down. And it wasn't just complacency on Labour's windfall tax, which he's now backing. It wasn't just complacency on inflation, which is now through the roof. And it wasn't just complacency on growth, which is now spluttering along at the back of the pack. Because his Chancellor also claimed that people should keep more of the rewards of their efforts. And then he put their taxes up. So does the Prime Minister want to explain to hard-working people whose wages are running out sooner and sooner each month and who are facing astronomical bills and prices just how his 15 tax rises since taking office have helped them to keep more of their rewards in their pocket?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, what we're doing is making sure, after a huge pandemic, that we are funding our vital public services, which we can, because of the steps that we take. What we're also doing is making sure that we put more money back into people's pockets by the measures that I've outlined today, whether through cutting national insurance contributions or lifting the living wage or lifting universal credit, Mr. Speaker. But all this is made possible. Because we took the responsible and sensible steps to protect our economy throughout COVID and then to come out strongly. And he's completely wrong about this country's growth performance, Mr. Speaker. He runs it down. He was proved wrong about COVID. He's going to be proved wrong again.
Just delusional. Mr. Speaker, last week I raised the case of Phoenix Halliwell, whose kidney condition means he needs daily dialysis and whose energy bill has gone through the roof as a result. I'm glad that, as a result, government officials got in touch with Phoenix yesterday, and I hope that will result in more support for people who are vulnerable. But it shouldn't be left to Labour to turn up week after week to make him aware of the consequences of his dither and delay. So I want to raise another issue where the government is sleepwalking into disaster. With the summer holidays looming, there are reports that the Home Office already has a backlog of 500,000 passports to issue. That's potentially more than 500,000 people worrying whether they will get away this summer. So can the Prime Minister reassure people that they won't miss out on their holidays due to the failures of his Home Office?
Well, I thank you very much, but I can tell him, actually, that what we're doing is massively increasing the speed with which the Passport Office deliver, and to the best of my knowledge, everybody is getting their passport within 4 to 6 weeks, Mr. Speaker. But that is because we are driving the leadership of this country, and we are getting things done that would never have been possible if we'd listened to them. We got Brexit done, Mr. Speaker, when he voted 48 times. 48 times he voted to undo the will of the people. We got the vaccine rollout done when he would have kept us in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker. We were the first European country to help the Ukrainians resist Vladimir Putin. Yes. Do you think, does anybody seriously believe for a second that they would have done it?
Some are trying to boo, some are trying to cheer. The worst of it is I can't hear the Prime Minister. Come on, Prime Minister.
Let me say very plainly, does anybody seriously think for a second that the Labour Party would have done that, Mr. Speaker, when eight of the shadow front bench, including the shadow Foreign Secretary, who is mysteriously not in his place, voted recently to get rid of this country's independent nuclear deterrent? And he campaigned to put Jeremy Corbyn in Downing Street, Mr. Speaker. We get on, we do the difficult things. We take the tough decisions, Mr. Speaker. Social care, we're fixing it.
Prime Minister, we both can't be on our feet. I'm trying to help you. You've got to help me as well. And I'm sure you've got to the end because Mr. Stewart's itching to get his question. Graham Stewart.